Grandma, you mean nothing to me. You only come here because my parents feel sorry for you. The words sliced through me like sharp knives. Ethan, the boy I'd held in my arms since he was a newborn, now 14 years old, didn't even glance up from his video game as his words tore through me. I stood frozen, the apple pie I'd baked earlier that morning trembling in my hands. The silence in the living room was so thick, you could cut it with a knife. The air drained from my lungs, my vision blurred. Stephanie walked into the room at that exact moment. From her expression, I knew she'd heard everything. I waited for her to scold Ethan, to say something, anything. But she only exchanged a quick, knowing look with my grandson, then turned to me. "Brenda, we need to talk." Her voice had a rehearsed quality, as if she'd practiced this very moment. That's when it hit me. The strange tension I'd felt since I arrived wasn't a coincidence. There was something more, something brewing beneath the surface. How could the boy who once called me Grandma's sweetheart say I meant nothing? How could my own son stand by? I need to tell you how it came to this. My name is Brenda. I'm 67 years old. I became a widow young when Robert, my husband, suffered a sudden massive heart attack. Our youngest was just 5 years old. Suddenly, alone, I faced 3 children to raise. I didn't have time for prolonged grief. I needed to put food on the table. I worked as a seamstress by day and a cleaner by night. My hands, now spotted with age, veiny, carry the memory of every stitch, every scrubbed floor, every meal prepared, ensuring my children never felt the sting of doing without. Chris, my oldest, always the most serious one. Even as a boy, he took on the role of man of the house. Perhaps that's why he grew up with that stiffness, that need to control everything. When he met Stephanie in college, I confess I felt a wave of relief. She had an easy smile, a lightness about her that Chris desperately needed. Their wedding was simple but happy, and when Ethan was born, 14 years ago, I felt like I was given a second chance. Not just to be a mother again, but to experience motherhood with the wisdom that only years can bring. "Mom, can you stay with Ethan while we're at work?" Chris asked when the baby was just 4 months old. Stephanie had landed a position at a multinational corporation and needed to return from maternity leave. He didn't even need to ask. My small apartment, just 2 blocks from their house, transformed into Ethan's second home. It was me who rocked him when he had colic, who knew every expression on his tiny face, who knew exactly how to soothe him. When he started to speak, his first words were, "Mommy, Daddy, and Grandma." Not necessarily in that order. The years passed too quickly. Soon I was taking Ethan to school, helping him with his homework, listening to his stories about his little friends. During school breaks, he'd sleep over at my house. We had our rituals, board games on rainy afternoons, bedtime stories curled up under the covers, and my famous lemon poppy seed cake that he always swore was the best in the universe. "Grandma, tell me again how Grandpa Robert proposed to you," he'd ask, tucked in under the covers, his eyes sparkling with curiosity. And I would tell him. I'd tell him about the man I met in my youth, about our dreams, about how life doesn't always follow the path we plan, but how it can still be beautiful. "When I grow up, I want to live close to you, just like Dad," he told me once, with that innocence and honesty only kids possess. I smiled and tucked those words away in my heart, like a precious treasure. But something started to shift when Ethan hit his preteens. It coincided with Stephanie's promotion, about 2 years back. Suddenly, she was always traveling, attending important meetings, coming home late. "Mom, you don't have to come every day," Chris started to say. "Ethan's a big boy now. He can manage after school." I felt a pang in my chest, but I understood. After all, my grandson was growing up. It was natural that he'd need more space, more independence. I cut down my visits to 3 times a week, then 2. Eventually only on Sundays. I noticed the changes in Ethan. The boy who used to run to hug me now barely looked up from his phone when I arrived. Our lively conversations were replaced by one-word answers. The lemon poppy seed cake, once devoured in minutes, now sat untouched in the fridge. "It's just a phase," I tell myself. "All teenagers go through this." But deep down, I knew there was something more. Little comments from Stephanie about me spoiling Ethan too much. Chris complaining that my ideas about parenting were outdated. The way they'd exchange glances when I suggested an outing or an activity with my grandson. Slowly, I began to feel like an intruder in the family I'd helped build, a stranger in my own son's home. And then, we arrived at yesterday's Sunday. I woke up early, as I always do. I prepared the apple pie with cinnamon, the recipe Ethan had loved since he was little. I chose my light blue dress, the one my grandson once said matched my eyes. I combed my gray hair carefully, put on a touch of discreet lipstick. On the way to their house, I rehearsed conversations in my head. Ethan had a swimming competition coming up. Maybe we could talk about that, or about the book I'd lent him last month. Had he liked it? When I arrived, I immediately sensed something was off. The house, normally so welcoming, felt tense. Chris opened the door with a strained smile. "Mom, good you came," he said, but his eyes avoided mine. Stephanie was in the kitchen, fiddling with her phone, and just gave a brief nod. Ethan was in the living room, absorbed in his video game. "Hi, sweetie." "I brought your favorite pie," I said, leaning in to kiss him. He barely looked up from the screen. "I don't like apple pie anymore." I tried to hide my disappointment. "That's okay, dear. Whenever you want to chat about school." That's when he paused his game, looked at me directly, and said those words I'll never forget. "Grandma, you mean nothing to me. You only come here because my parents feel sorry for you." And then, Stephanie walked into the room. "Brenda, we need to talk." I sank onto the sofa, my legs trembling so much I could barely stand. Chris joined us, sitting next to his wife, forming a united front against me. "We received an offer," Stephanie began, her voice professional, as if she were in a business meeting. "The company is transferring me to the branch in Germany. It's a unique opportunity." "Germany?" I repeated, the word sounding foreign, alien in my mouth. "Yes, Mom," Chris continued. "It's all set. We leave in 3 weeks." 3 weeks. They were moving to another continent in 3 weeks, and they were only telling me now. My voice caught in my throat. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I managed, my voice thick with unshed tears. "You always dramatize, Mom," Chris replied, a sigh already escaping him. "We just didn't want the drama." Ethan, who had gone back to his video game, let out a small chuckle, as if my pain were amusing, as if I were just an inconvenient old woman. "We're already organizing everything," Stephanie continued, ignoring my distress. "Ethan's even been taking German lessons for months now." Months? They had known for months. "And when were you planning to tell me?" I asked, feeling the tears sting my eyes. Chris sighed, clearly annoyed. "We're telling you now, Mom. It's not the end of the world. There's video calls, the internet." I looked at my grandson. Still absorbed in his game, as if none of this mattered. As if I didn't matter. "Ethan, do you really want to go?" I asked, in a last desperate attempt at connection. He just shrugged, not looking at me. "It'll be cool. They have real snow there." Snow. He was trading our history, our Sundays, our memories, for snow. "I understand," I said, though understanding was a chasm away. "Well, I hope you'll be very happy there." I stood up, my legs still shaky but determined to leave with what little dignity I had left. "The pie's in the kitchen. You can eat it or throw it away, as you prefer." I walked to the door, waiting, perhaps naively, for someone to call me back. For Ethan to drop the video game and run to hug me, like he did when he was little. For Chris, my son, whom I'd raised with so much sacrifice, to realize the cruelty of that moment. But no one said anything. The door clicked shut behind me, a soft, brutal finality. I went home that Sunday with my heart in pieces. My small apartment, once a haven, now felt cavernous, hollow with silence. The walls decorated with photos of Ethan at different ages seemed to mock me. I sat in the armchair where I used to read stories to my grandson, and I cried. I cried for hours, until the well of tears ran dry. I cried for the boy I thought I knew. I cried for the son I no longer recognized. I cried for the lonely old age that now seemed inevitable. When night fell, I picked up the photo albums and began to flip through them. Ethan as a newborn, wrapped in the blanket I'd knitted myself. Ethan taking his first steps, holding my hands. Ethan blowing out birthday candles, always with a smile that lit up the world. My world. What happened to that boy? Did I truly mean nothing after so many years of love and dedication? Or had they, at some point, without me ever realizing it, planted the idea in him that I was just a burden, an obligation? I spent the night awake, those questions a relentless current in my mind. When the sun rose, I had made a decision. I can't force anyone to love me. I can't stop them from leaving. But I can choose how to deal with this pain. I called my friend Sharon, who always invited me to the church craft group. For the first time, I said yes. Then, I sat down and wrote a letter to Ethan. Not to give him now, but for when he's older, and maybe understands what true love really means. Words hurt more than any physical wound ever could. You mean nothing to me. 7 words that shattered 14 years of love. But I've learned, in my 67 years, that dignity isn't about never falling. It's about how we get back up. Now here I am, sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of lukewarm tea. The phone beside me stays silent. No call from Chris asking if I'm okay. No text from Ethan apologizing. Tomorrow's another day. And I still have so much love to give, even if it's not for those who don't value it anymore. But one question still echoed in my mind as night fell again. How do you move on when those you love most decide you mean nothing? The answer didn't come that night, nor the next morning. I woke up with swollen eyes and a weight in my chest that felt like concrete. I made myself breakfast, a simple piece of toast and black coffee, but could barely eat. The apartment, once so full of life with Ethan's visits, now felt too big, too quiet. That's when the phone rang. My heart jumped. Was it Chris? Ethan? Maybe they'd had a change of heart. Maybe. "Brenda, it's Sharon. Don't forget the craft group starts at 2. I'll pick you up, okay?" I felt a mix of disappointment and relief. It wasn't my family, but it was someone who cared. "Thanks, Sharon. I'll be ready." I hung up the phone and looked at the living room wall, where a clock Robert had given me on our first wedding anniversary still ticked away the hours. I remembered a conversation we had just before he passed. It was a Sunday afternoon, much like this one. Robert was already sick, though neither of us knew how serious his heart condition was. We were sitting on the porch, watching the boys play in the small backyard. "Brenda," he'd said, his voice already a little weak, "do you remember what my dad used to say about trees?" I smiled. Robert's father had been a lifelong arborist and always spoke in plant metaphors. "Which one?" He had so many philosophies. "The one about the roots and the branches. He used to say a healthy tree needs deep roots so its branches can grow tall. But sometimes..." He paused, watching Chris, who was 15 at the time, pushing his younger brother on the makeshift swing. "Sometimes the branches grow so tall, they forget where they came from. At the time, I thought it was just another one of Robert's philosophical musings. Now, so many years later, his words came back with painful clarity. The Churchcraft group was bigger than I imagined. About 15 women, most my age or older, sat in a circle in a brightly lit room at the back of the parish hall. Some were knitting, others embroidering, some crocheting. Sharon introduced me to everyone, and I was greeted with genuine smiles. I sat next to Mrs. Helen, a woman almost 80, who was doing delicate crochet work. "First time here, dear?" she asked without taking her eyes off her project. "Yes, I never really had much time for these things." "Oh, I understand. Always taking care of others, aren't we? And who takes care of us?" That simple question brought tears to my eyes. I tried to hide them, picking up one of the knitting needles Sharon had lent me. "I'm sorry," Mrs. Helen continued, noticing my emotion. "I didn't mean to pry." "No, it's okay. It's just, I'm going through a tough time." She finally looked up from her crochet and gazed at me with surprising intensity for someone her age. "Children." I nodded, unable to speak. "Ah, children. You know, Brenda, I raised five. 3 boys and 2 girls. Today, only one of my daughters still visits me regularly. The others, they have their own lives, as they say." "And how do you deal with that?" I asked, genuinely interested. Mrs. Helen smiled, a smile that wasn't bitter, but not entirely happy either. "One day at a time, dear. One day at a time. And I learned that life is much more than just blood family. Look around you." I followed her gaze around the circle of women. Some chatted animatedly. Others worked in quiet concentration. There was a welcoming energy in the room. "This is my family now," Mrs. Helen continued. "It doesn't replace my children, of course. Nothing does. But it fills the empty spaces. And with time, those spaces get smaller." When I got home that afternoon, I felt strangely lighter. Mrs. Helen's words echoed in my mind. One day at a time. It seemed like simple, almost trivial advice, but there was deep wisdom in it. I decided to do something I hadn't done in a long time. Cook for myself. Not just a quick sandwich or instant soup, but a full meal, like the ones I used to prepare for my family. As I chopped vegetables for a rich, hearty stew, I remembered another time, another moment of rupture in my life. It was a week after Robert's funeral. The relatives had gone, the neighbors had stopped bringing casseroles, and I was alone with 3 kids and a mountain of bills to pay. I sat at the kitchen table surrounded by collection notices and just broke down. I cried like I never had before. Not even at the funeral. It was a cry of despair, of fear for the future, of absolute loneliness. That's when I felt a small hand on my shoulder. Chris, only 15, stood beside me, his eyes too serious for his age. "Mom, don't cry. I'll help. I can get a job after school." Those words broke my heart in a different way. My son, still a child, offering to carry a burden that wasn't his. "No, honey," I replied, wiping my tears. "Your job is to study. I'll figure it out." And I did. In the following days, I looked for work everywhere possible. I took on sewing jobs for the local dry cleaner. I started cleaning houses for more affluent families. On weekends, I sold baked goods, cakes and pies, that I prepared late into the night. They were difficult years of constant work, short nights, calloused hands, but I never allowed my children to give up their studies. Chris especially seemed to understand the sacrifice. He studied diligently, got the best grades, earned a scholarship for college. "One day I'll give you a better life, Mom," he promised, and I believed him. I believed him with all my heart. The stew was ready, its aroma filling my small apartment. I served myself a generous portion and sat at the table. For the first time in days, I felt truly hungry. As I ate, I thought about Chris, the serious boy who promised to give me a better life. The man who now seemed embarrassed by my presence. What had happened? At what point did I lose my son? Maybe it was gradual, I thought. Maybe it started when he met Stephanie, an only child of successful parents, accustomed to a lifestyle I could never offer. Or maybe it was when he got his first important job, at a company where my small-town accent and my working hands didn't quite fit in with the elegant cocktail parties. I remembered a holiday party at his company many years ago. Ethan was still little, maybe 5 years old. "Mom, are you sure you don't want me to pick you up?" Chris asked on the phone. "No need, son. I'll take the bus and be there in half an hour." I had saved for months to buy a new dress for the occasion. It wasn't anything extravagant, a simple navy blue style, but it was the prettiest I'd ever owned. I spent almost an hour doing my hair and putting on subtle makeup. When I arrived at the ballroom, I was momentarily intimidated. It was an elegant place, with crystal chandeliers and waiters serving champagne in delicate flutes. I looked for Chris in the crowd and finally spotted him, talking to a group of men in suits. I approached timidly. "Hi, honey." Chris turned, surprised. "Mom, you're here already." There was something strange in his tone, a tension I didn't understand at the time. "Everyone, this is my mom, Brenda," he said to his colleagues without much enthusiasm. One of the men, clearly superior to Chris in the company, extended his hand. "Pleasure to meet you, ma'am. Your son is one of our most promising employees." "Thank you," I replied, proud. He was always very studious. "Mom only went to high school," Chris quickly interrupted. "But she always valued education. Right, Mom?" I nodded, confused by his need to explain my schooling. The night went on uncomfortably. Chris always seemed anxious when I was around, as if he feared I might say something embarrassing. Stephanie, elegant in her designer dress, kept me in superficial conversations, far from the important people. It was Ethan who saved the night for me. Tired of the formalities, he clung to my skirt. "Grandma, tell me a story?" I sat with him in a quieter corner, and soon we were absorbed in a world of princes and dragons. That's when I heard Stephanie's voice, talking to someone nearby. "Yes, that's Chris's mom. You know how it is. She raised the kids alone. Lots of sacrifice. Chris practically raised himself, actually. It's admirable how he managed to overcome his..." The words hit me like a slap. Limitations. Was that how they saw my life of work and sacrifice? Just something to be overcome? That night, I went home early, claiming I was tired. Chris barely noticed me leave. I finished up my casserole and washed the dishes, thinking about how that holiday party had been a preview of what was to come. The little snubs, the excuses not to include me in events, the way Chris had gradually stopped sharing details of his life. And Ethan, my sweet Ethan, who once ran into my arms, now saying I meant nothing. The phone rang again, interrupting my thoughts. This time, it was Chris. "Mom? Everything okay?" His voice sounded formal, like he was making a business call. "Yes, son. I'm fine." Silence on the other end. I could hear voices in the background. Probably Stephanie and Ethan. "Look, Mom. About yesterday. Ethan shouldn't have spoken to you that way. We've talked to him." I waited for him to continue, for him to say my grandson wanted to apologize, to hand the phone to him. But the silence stretched. "It's all right, Chris," I finally replied. Teenagers say things they don't truly mean. More silence, then, "Actually, Mom, I think we need to be honest. Things have changed. Ethan's growing up. He has other interests now. And this move to Germany. It's a huge opportunity for all of us." "I understand," I replied, though understanding was a chasm away. "We'll stop by before we leave, to say a proper goodbye." He continued as if scheduling an appointment in his planner. "Maybe next Sunday?" "Of course, son. I'll make a special lunch." "No need to go to any trouble, Mom. It's just a quick stop." When I hung up, a quiet determination hardened inside me. It wouldn't be a quick stop. It would be a dignified farewell, on my terms. If this was going to be the last time I saw my grandson and my son before they left for the other side of the world, I'd make every minute count. The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity. I went to my craft group twice as often, and under the patient guidance of Mrs. Helen, I started knitting a scarf for Ethan. It wasn't perfect. My stitches were still uneven, but I was pouring all my love into every movement of the needles. "Who's it for?" Mrs. Helen asked, watching my work. "For my grandson. He's moving to Germany. It gets cold there." She nodded, understanding. "It'll be beautiful. And every time he feels the chill, he'll remember the warmth of your love." I also started organizing old photos. I found pictures I didn't even remember existing. Chris as a little boy, holding newborn Ethan. Me teaching Ethan how to bake cookies. The three of us on a picnic in the park. I put the best ones in a new album, with spaces for them to add pictures of their new life in Germany. On Saturday, the day before their visit, I spent the day cooking. I prepared all of Ethan's favorite dishes. My famous lemon poppy seed cake, of course, but also that roasted chicken he loved when he was little, the homemade lasagna he used to say was the best in the world, and apple pie. Yes, even after he'd said he didn't like it anymore. Because deep down, I knew it wasn't about the pie. As I cooked, I remembered another moment, years ago, when Ethan was about 8. It was a rainy day, and Ethan was at my house after school. Chris and Stephanie would be working late, so he'd spend the night with me. "Grandma, I'm bored," he complained, staring out the window at the relentless rain. "How about we make some cookies?" I suggested. "Those chocolate chip ones you like." His eyes lit up. "Can I help make the dough?" "Of course you can." Soon we were in the kitchen, flour everywhere, laughing as we tried to shape the cookies. Ethan insisted on making a heart-shaped one. "This one's for you, Grandma," he said, proud of his crooked but loving creation. When the cookies were ready, we sat at the kitchen table with 2 glasses of milk. Ethan bit into a cookie and closed his eyes, savoring it. Grandma, why is the food at your house always so much tastier? I laughed. It's the secret ingredient. What is it? He asked, curious. Love, I replied simply. When we cook with love, everything tastes better. Ethan thought for a moment, then asked with the innocence of a child. Is that why the frozen food Mom buys is never as good? Because it doesn't have love? I didn't know what to say. I didn't want to speak ill of Stephanie, who worked hard and did her best. Your mom loves you in other ways, Ethan. Each person shows love in their own way. He nodded, seeming to understand. Then suddenly he hugged me tight. I love you, Grandma. Just the way you are. That memory made me stop in the middle of the kitchen, a wooden spoon in my hand, tears streaming down my face. Just the way you are. When did that change? When did I stop being enough? Just the way I am. Sunday arrived, sunny and warm, as if the weather was oblivious to the turmoil in my heart. I dressed carefully. The same light blue dress Ethan had once said matched my eyes. I set the table with my best tablecloth, the one I saved for special occasions. At 11 o'clock sharp, the doorbell rang. I took a deep breath and opened the door. Chris, Stephanie, and Ethan were there, looking uncomfortable. Ethan still avoided my gaze, fiddling with his phone. Come in, I invited, trying to sound cheerful. I've prepared a special lunch. Mom, I said it would be a quick visit, Chris began. But he stopped when he saw the table set, the aroma of food filling the apartment. Please, I insisted. It's our goodbye, just lunch. Stephanie and Chris exchanged glances, then reluctantly nodded. Ethan finally put his phone away, seeming surprised by the effort I'd made. We sat at the table, and for a moment, there was an awkward silence. Then I started serving the food, talking about trivial things, the weather, neighborhood news, the craft group I'd joined. Gradually, the tension began to ease. Chris commented on the moving preparations. Stephanie mentioned the international school Ethan would attend in Germany. And Ethan remained silent, but at least he ate the food I had prepared. It was when I served dessert, my lemon poppy seed cake, that I noticed a change in his expression. He looked at the cake for a long moment, then looked directly at me for the first time that day. Grandma. First period. I waited, my heart pounding. Can I take a slice to go? It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a declaration of love, but it was something. A small acknowledgement of our shared history. Of course, my love. I'll wrap it up for you. After dessert, I got up and retrieved the gifts I'd prepared. First, the photo album. For you to remember where you came from, as you build your new life, I explained, handing it to Chris. He flipped through the pages, and I saw a flicker of emotion in his eyes as he found photos of his own childhood, moments he might have forgotten. Thank you, Mom, he said, his voice a little choked up. To Stephanie, I handed a small wrapped package. Here's the recipe for my lemon poppy seed cake, along with some of my special ingredients. I know Ethan said he's outgrown it, but you never know. Stephanie seemed genuinely touched. Oh, Brenda, that's incredibly kind. Finally, for Ethan, I handed him the scarf I had knitted. It's not perfect, I know, I admitted, but it'll keep you warm in those German winters. Ethan took the scarf, running his fingers over the uneven stitches. For a moment, I thought I saw his eyes well up, but he quickly disguised it. Thanks, Grandma, he mumbled, barely audible. It wasn't the warm hug I'd secretly hoped for, nor the apologies I perhaps deserved. But it was a start. A small recognition that, despite everything, there was still a connection between us. When it was time for them to leave, I walked them to the door. Chris gave me a quick hug, Stephanie a kiss on the cheek. Ethan hesitated, then extended his hand for a formal handshake. I ignored the outstretched hand and pulled him into a hug. For a second, he was stiff in my arms. Then, very briefly, I felt his arms return my embrace. "Take care, Ethan," I whispered. "And remember, no matter what happens, no matter what you say or think, my love for you will never change." He nodded, a silent surrender, and followed his parents out. I stood at the door, watching them get into the car and drive away. I didn't know when I'd see them again. I didn't know if Ethan would wear the scarf, if Chris would look at the photo album, if Stephanie would try to make the lemon poppy seed cake. But I knew I had done what I could. I had offered my love, unconditionally, without expectations. The rest wasn't in my hands. 3 weeks passed. Chris called once to let me know they had arrived safely in Germany. The conversation was brief, formal. I didn't speak to Ethan. I continued to attend my craft group. I started learning how to crochet with Mrs. Helen. I accepted an invitation to the church choir, something I'd always wanted to do but never had the time for. One Saturday afternoon, while organizing some things in my cabinet, I found an old drawing by Ethan. He must have been about 6 when he made it. Stick figures representing him, his parents, and me, all holding hands, a smiling sun in the corner of the page. "My Family," read the title in childish letters. I looked at that drawing a long time, a tide of nostalgia and acceptance washing over me. That moment had passed. Ethan was growing up, following his path, and I needed to follow mine. I put the drawing back in my keepsake box and went to the kitchen to make some tea. While the water was boiling, my phone buzzed. It was a message. I opened it, not really expecting anything. And there it was. A photo of Ethan, wearing the scarf I'd knitted for him, in front of an old building, probably his new school. The message just said, "It's snowing here." The scarf helped. Thanks. It wasn't a declaration of love. It wasn't an apology for what he'd said. It was just a small acknowledgement, a fragile thread of connection spanning the ocean that now separated us. But it was something. And for me, in that moment, it was everything. I replied with a simple, "Glad it's keeping you warm. Take care, sweetheart." I put my phone down and poured my tea. Through the kitchen window, I could see the sky starting to darken, the first stars appearing. The words still sting, it's true. "You mean nothing to me," still echoes in my mind in the quietest moments. But now I know that words aren't the end of the story. They're just a chapter. Painful, yes, but not definitive. True love, the kind I gave my children, my grandson. It doesn't need to be reciprocated to exist. It's still there, constant as the stars now twinkling in the night sky. Maybe one day Ethan will look up and see the same stars I see now and remember. Maybe one day he'll understand. Until then, I'll keep living. One day at a time, just like Mrs. Helen said. Learning to appreciate not just what I've lost, but what I still have. Learning that, even at 67, there are new paths to walk, new friends to make, new skills to develop. And who knows, maybe one day when Ethan is older, when he has his own kids maybe, he'll understand what unconditional love really is. Maybe he'll read the letter I wrote and kept for him. Maybe he'll understand that, despite everything, he never stopped meaning everything to me. In the meantime, a new day is dawning. There's a choir to rehearse for, some crocheting to learn, a life to live. My life, finally mine, with all its imperfect beauty and unexpected possibilities. Because I've learned, through the pain and the loss, that a broken heart can also be an open heart, open to new forms of love, new meanings, new ways of being. And maybe that's the most important lesson of all, that even when words break our heart, we can still choose how to put the pieces back together. Not exactly as it was before, the cracks will always be there, but perhaps into something new, something unexpectedly beautiful in its fragility and resilience. Like kintsugi, the Japanese art of repairing broken pottery with gold, transforming the scars into part of the object's beauty. My scars are now part of me, golden lines telling the story of a love that persists, even when it isn't returned. And that, I've discovered, is also a form of dignity.